Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, ranging from bestsellers to celebrity memoirs, news, business, and self-development. Every month, members get 1 credit to pick any title, plus 2 Audible originals from a monthly selection, and access to daily news digests from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post, as well as guided meditation programs. Between a full-time job in IT and a full-time job in podcasting, it gets harder and harder to sit down and read the books I'm interested in. This is where Audible comes in. I can listen on my daily commute, relaxing, or while out running errands and still get in the books I've been wanting to get into. You can download titles and listen offline anytime, anywhere. The app is free and can be installed on all smartphones and tablets. Now you can try Audible risk-free with a special 30-day free trial by visiting audibletrial.com/Nerdery and Murdery. That's audibletrial.com/Nerdery and Murdery. Don't let your busy life get in the way of that great book you've been wanting to read. Go get your free trial of Audible today. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. This is Geoffrey, and we've talked about many times before that I experience problems and struggles with my mental health, and really without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy does work. It's helped for me, but what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, or you're not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's really time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles, and it's time to start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is a customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. So join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are your greatest asset. And there's a special offer to Nerdery and Murdery listeners. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/Nerdery and Murdery. That's betterhelp.com/Nerdery and Murdery. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast.
Hey, remember when they used to manufacture and make computers in our hometown? Wasn't that awesome?
I guess. Oh. Welcome to episode 138 of Nerdery and Murdery.
Hey, Big 138. I'm Zig with your nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your Murdery. Welcome to another week of the highs and lows, the ups and downs, the good and the bad, and the nerd, the murd. I am not feeling good. And for those of you listening out there, I know I said that in episode 136. I have not been sick for 3 weeks. Remember, we record multiple episodes in a day.
Yes.
So starting to kind of feel a scratchy voice. So see how my voice will get through this.
Everybody in my house got influenza A except for me.
Well, I'm still going to go golfing today. I don't care. It's going to be 25-mile-an-hour winds.
Yeah, my God. Well, hopefully they're with you.
Well, no, the way the course wraps around, you've got some that are with you, some that are directly against you, some that are to the side.
Oh, no.
It just
no.
Depends on which way that the particular hole faces. So, oh, man, probably lose a ball in the water today with that wind.
Nice.
I hate losing a ball in the water, especially my Cowboys golf balls.
Oh, you get Cowboys golf balls?
Yes, I do. I tried using a blue one yesterday, and that was really hard to see.
Yeah. I would think it would be.
Well, and it was supposed to be very vivid, so I was trying it out. I've used that blue one. I've used red ones, which I really like the red ones, but those are hard to see as well. So I've gone back to the whites and got my Cowboys ones, so using those.
I
So
would think
anyway,
red would be easy to see.
I would too, but you would be surprised. I have probably lost more red than I can count.
Well, see, because I can see the blue kind of blended in with the green a little bit, because they're similar colors. But yeah, red seems like it'd stand out like a
One would
big red sore thumb.
one would think, but that's not the case. So anyway, I'll let you take over on the nerdery side of the house.
Excellent. Today we're going to talk about the Tandy Radio Shack TRS 80 CoCo or color computer.
Actually, that was about my fourth computer to use.
The CoCo?
Yeah, my first would have been the Apple II and the Apple II C or E,
Okay.
whichever one of those two. That was my first one, and then it was the Commodore PET, and then the Commodore 64, and that was in Wichita Falls for both of those at school. And then when we moved to Fort Worth, the computer class I was in there used the Trash 80s.
Mm-hmm. Trash 80s. And we call them Trash 80s because it's TRS 80.
Yeah.
They weren't necessarily trash. It stands for Tandy Radio Shack.
Yeah, it was a beating back then because the different the different computers all had their own language.
Mm-hmm.
Based off similar, but all had their own, and so you couldn't use software between the two.
No, you could not. You could not. You were either, and sometimes even between different models of the same company.
Right.
You were either using Commodore or you were using Tandy or you were using Apple or eventually IBM.
Yeah.
And IBM or clones of IBM is what took over the computer industry. Apple's still around. But they're a real small piece of the marketplace.
Apple? No, they're not.
Of computers?
No, I wouldn't consider them small at all.
They're still only like 15%.
You think it's that low?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's that. Now, phones, yeah, no, I'll give you that. But like actual computers, yeah, I think they're still like 15% or less. Of course, you still got Linux boxes, which make up, 1, maybe 2%.
Right.
And then everything else is Wintel computers.
Right.
Or IBM clones.
Which is funny though, if you were to go by what you see in movies and TV though, it's Apple.
Apple. Yeah, everybody's got Apple.
Apple is king, which is wild.
So Apple's what they use in Hollywood.
Right.
Just because Apple invested in entertainment.
Right.
Even though a lot of them actually use PCs, not Apple. So the Radio Shack TRS-80 color computer, later marketed as the Tandy color computer or the CoCo, which is what we're going to be referring to it as, is a line of home computers developed and sold by Tandy Corporation. Despite sharing a name with the earlier TRS-80 or Trash 80, the CoCo is completely different. Incompatible system and a radical departure in design and compatibility with its Motorola 6809E processor rather than the Zilog Z80, which got used in a lot of stuff. A lot of your early consoles used the Zilog Z80 as well as your early computers. The Tandy color computer line started in 1980 with what is now called the CoCo 1. It was followed by the CoCo 2 in 83 and the CoCo 3 in 86. All three models maintain a high level of software and hardware compatibility, with few programs written for an older model being unable to run on the newer ones. The CoCo 3 was discontinued in 1991 when Tandy went, like everybody else, into IBM PC clones. Now, all CoCo models shipped with Color Basic, an implementation of Microsoft Basic in ROM, and variations of the OS 9 multitasking operating system were available from third parties. So you could get a version of Windows on a CoCo for the CoCo 3. The original version of the CoCo sports a large silver gray case with a calculator-like chiclet keyboard and was available with memory sizes of 4K, 16K, or 32K versions, with at least 16K of memory installed, shipped with standard Microsoft Color Basic or optionally extended Color Basic. The only available connection to a display device is to a TV. Early versions of the CoCo 1 had a black keyboard surround the TRS-80 nameplate above the keyboard on the left side and a RAM badge button affixed to the top right side of the case, and later versions removed the black keyboard surround and RAM button and moved the TRS-80 nameplate to the midline of the case. Computer is based on a single printed circuit board with all semiconductors manufactured by Motorola, including the MC6809E CPU, the MC6847 VDG for graphics, the MC6883 SAM and RAM, which consist of 2104 or 4K times 1 chips, 4K models, or 4116 16K by 1 chips, and the 16K models. The early CoCos only have 8 RAM sockets, so upgrading to 32K required piggybacking 2 sets of 4116 chips and adding a few jumper wires. A later motherboard revision removed the 4K RAM option and were upgraded to 32K with half-bad 4164 DRAM. These boards have jumpers marked high-low to determine which half of the memory chip was good. As memory production yields improved and costs went down, many, perhaps most of the 32K CoCo 1 shipped with perfectly good 4164 memory chips. Utilities and programs began to take advantage of the hidden 32K. Users opening the case risks invalidating the warranty. Radio Shack could upgrade all versions that ship with standard Color Basic to extended Color Basic, developed by Microsoft for $99. Byte, an early magazine, wrote in 1981 that through extended Color Basic, Radio Shack has released the first truly easy to use and inexpensive system that generates full color graphics. Eventually, the 32K memory option was dropped entirely, and only 16K and 64K versions were offered.
I love Byte magazine.
Oh my God.
I really
love Byte, and I had a subscription to Compute and Byte at one point.
Yeah, I love Compute too. Yeah.
Oh my God, that was so cool. Sorry, listeners, we're going to nerd out a little bit on this. So I have included videos in our YouTube playlist that kind of explain some of this. And maybe I should start with the Trinity, give you guys some background. Okay.
You might nerd out on it. I'm not as much. I wasn't as fascinated by the Trash 80. I didn't have that much exposure to it. I had a semester exposure to the Trash 80. I liked the Apple and the Commodore because A, I could play video games on them. B, I could program on both of them in BASIC and had a great time with it. But the Trash 80s BASIC was slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't have as much fun on the Trash 80. I didn't like them.
You didn't like the Trash. Well, and we're talking about the CoCos, not the original Trash 80s.
But I never got to deal with the CoCo.
With the CoCo?
No.
Yeah. So let's start with the Trinity. In 1977, in 1976, you couldn't buy a computer for your house that you didn't have to build yourself in a kit. In 1977, 3 computers released that you just brought home and plugged in. That was the Commodore PET, the Apple II, and the TRS-80. Now, granted, they were rudimentary. They did have slots for cartridges. Eventually, this CoCo did as well as ports for floppy disks, because people wanted to play games as well as use a computer. Commodore upgraded in 1980, the CoCo. Apple went from the Apple II to the Apple II C.
I think it was C. Was C.
And eventually the Apple IIe, which was probably the best computer they ever made. Maybe the best computer made ever. I'm going to say that. I'm going to say that and put myself out there. That Apple IIe was brilliant. And because it was Steve Wozniak's baby, Steve Jobs put all of the money into advertising for the Macintosh, which was not as good of a computer as the Apple IIc, I believe. And the Apple IIc sold up until like the early 1990s, late 80s, early 90s. It was the one that had the Woz signature on the outside of it, where Woz had actually signed it. But Steve Jobs wanted to push the Macintosh, which did not sell as well as the Apple IIc or the Apple IIs. Commodore goes on and only starts selling the PET to schools and things, and then they come out with the VIC-20, and then a year later or 2 years later, they come out with the Commodore 64, which revolutionized houses. Most people, if they had computers in their houses, they were either a TRS-80 or a Commodore 64, and most people were Commodore 64. They controlled like 50% of the market. And this was early on. The IBM didn't release its computer till 1981, 1982, and you didn't use that at home. That was a business device. IBM, International Business Machines. That wasn't their bread and butter. They just wanted to kind of get in on the market. And then people realized with what the IBM machines were able to do and started cloning them and selling cheaper versions, or I say cheaper, less expensive versions that you could play games on like you could with a Commodore, and they eventually forced everybody else out of the market except Apple, which now makes Macintoshes and PowerPCs. I don't think they make any other type of computer other than that. Is that right?
I believe that is correct.
Yeah. And it's not even the old-fashioned PowerPC, because by the mid-90s, Apple was producing a device which, and I will say, is superior to, because it could run Apple stuff and it could run IBM clone stuff on it as well, at an almost full compatibility rate. And then when Steve Jobs came back, he canceled the PowerPC because he wanted the Macintosh to have market share. I am not a fan of that dude, and I never have been. I think he takes a lot of credit for a lot of other people's hard work. And everything that he actually had a hand in designing failed miserably. I'm thinking of the Apple III and the Lisa. They just weren't made well. It was all style over substance, whereas with Tandy and Commodore, and again, we're not even talking about the IBM PC clones. It was functionality and cost to the consumer over style. They looked okay. They're never going to beat a Macintosh in a beauty contest, but you don't have to. That's not what we had them for. We had them for playing games and doing schoolwork or work, running Lotus Notes, things like that. So yeah, I'm sorry I went off on a tangent there.
No, and I was going to say, if you want to see a couple of good movies about really kind of how much of a jerk Steve Jobs was, Pirates of the Silicon Valley.
Pirates of the Silicon Valley, where Steve Jobs is played by Noah Wyle.
And it's great. And Jobs, where he's played by Michael Fassbender.
Yeah.
Two very, very good movies, and shows what Jobs' personality was really like.
Oh, yeah. Steve Jobs was a horrible human being and not a great company guy. Everybody thinks, oh, he's such a genius. No, he didn't invent any of that. He didn't invent none of that. Everything that he invented was trash. He took credit for all the stuff that he was involved with Next after Apple. And Next were brilliant computers. Didn't last very long.
Right.
They were basically based on Apple architecture, but he didn't invent any of that. He stepped in and took credit for it. Yeah. Okay. Enough about Steve Jobs. We're going to talk about Tandy. Charles Tandy. So in late 82, a version of the color computer with a white case called the TDP System 100 was distributed by RCA and sold through non-Tandy stores. Except for the nameplate and case, it is identical to the CoCo 1. Later, both the CoCo and the TDP System 100 shipped with a white case with ventilation slots running the length of the case rather than only on the sides. The ventilation scheme carried over to the CoCo 2. Some later versions of the CoCo had a modified keyboard, often referred to as the melted keyboard with bigger keycaps. Peripherals included tape cassette storage, serial printers, a 5 1/4 floppy disk drive, pen and graphics tablet called the XPad, speech and sound generators, and joysticks. The CoCo Model 2, during the initial CoCo 1 production run, much of the discrete support circuitry had been re-engineered into a handful of custom integrated circuits, leaving much of the circuit board area of the CoCo 1 as empty space. To cut production costs, the case was shortened by about 25%, and a new, smaller power supply and motherboard were designed. The melted keyboard from the white CoCo 1 and the TDP 100 style ventilation slots were carried over. Aside from the new compatibility with previous generations, the removal of the 12-volt power supply crippled some peripherals, such as the original floppy disk controller, which then needed to be upgraded and installed in a multi-pack interface or supplied with external power. The CoCo 2 was sold with 16 and 64 models, or 16K and 64K models. 16K models used 1K times 1 DRAMs, but the chips are not the common 4116. They were instead 4517s, which were actually manufactured by Radio Shack, not by Motorola. They had the upgraded basic ROMs, minor features and fix some bugs. A redesigned 5-volt disk controller was introduced with its own new disk basic ROM. It adds a new command, DOS, to about boot disks for boot software from disks. This requires a disk with a special boot sector. Production partially moved to Korea, with production in the US and Korea happening in parallel using the same part numbers. But around March 1984, Radio Shack began advertising 64K version of the CoCo 2, which also included an enhanced full travel typewriter style keyboard in the production run, replacing the previous belted keyboard. The final significant change in the life of the CoCo 2 was to use enhanced VDG and MC68 47T1, allowing lowercase characters and changing the text screen border colors. These features were not enabled in BASIC. Midway through the production run of these models, the nameplate was changed from Radio Shack TRS-80 Color Computer 2 to Tandy Color Computer 2, or just CoCo 2. The red, green, and blue shapes were replaced with red, green, and blue parallelograms. Creative Computing wrote in December of 1984 that the color computer was the best educational computer for under $1,000. The magazine said that it had fewer but better quality educational software than the Commodore 64, and that Radio Shack was dedicated to the educational market while Commodore was not. Early TRS-80 Color Computer 2 with melted keyboards. Now the Model 3, by 1985, color computer users worried that the company would abandon their computers in favor of the Tandy 1000. The Tandy 1000 was an IBM clone. Tandy executive Ed Judge stated that year that no home computer on the market today has the potential horsepower for the CoCo. We believe it also had a good future. On July 30th, 1986, Tandy announced the CoCo 3 at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City. It came with 128K of RAM, which could be upgraded to 512K. The panel behind the keyboard and cartridge door plastics were changed from black to gray. The keyboard layout was revised, putting the arrow keys in a diamond configuration and adding Control Alt Clear F1 and F2 keys. It sold in Radio Shack stores and Tandy computer centers for $219.95 in 1986 money, which is about $1,500. No, it's less than that. It's under $1,000 in today's money, I believe. I believe that's right. The CoCo 3 is compatible with most older software and CoCo 2 peripherals. The 6809 and the CoCo 1 and 2 run at lower megahertz than this CoCo 3. But it is able to downgrade and run most of the peripherals and as well as the software.
$219 from 86 is 580 today.
There you go. It's $500. You can buy a brand new CoCo 3 in 1986 for $500. Thank you for that calculation, sir.
Sure.
I've got enough notes here with a bunch of numbers running across it. I appreciate that. Output to composite video monitor or analog RGB monitor in addition to CoCo 1 and CoCo 2's TV output. This improves the clarity of the output itself. A paged memory management unit breaks up the 6809 64K address space into 8 by 8 kilobyte chunks. This scheme would later allow third-party RAM upgrades of up to 2 meg. Text display with real lowercase at 32, 40, 64, and 80 characters per line, and in between 16 and 24 lines per screen. Text characters attributed included 8 foreground and 8 background colors, underline and blink. New graphics resolutions of 160, 256, 320, or 640 pixels wide by 192 to 225 lines. From a palette of 64 colors. There are 2 palette modes, RGB, 3 base colors for 3 levels of intensity, and white and black, and 2 gray tones, and composite 16 distinct colors with 4 levels of intensity. So if you had the RGB, you could run 64 colors, but with some of the others, it was a little less. But you still got pretty good color. As much color as you were getting out of your Nintendo at the time or your Sega Master System, especially for the 64 version. Now, Tandy continued to sell the CoCo 3 along with the Tandy 1000s. They discontinued the old TRS-80s by this point. And by 1991, they stopped selling the CoCo 3 and were selling the Tandy 1000s, which they increased the numbers, but they're basically just IBM clones, the same. They went from a 8086 to a 286 to a 386 to a 486. But by the middle of the 90s, Tandy got out of the computer market and we're selling compacts instead. Now, in our YouTube playlist, I have included several videos of the TRS-80 CoCo, and we've got pictures of all 3 of the systems, as well as a video of Donkey Monkey for the TRS-80 CoCo, which is a ripoff of Donkey Kong, but at the time, it was the best one you could play at home. I love Donkey Monkey. But yeah, so kind of in summation, I wanted to talk about Tandy, Radio Shack, the CoCo, the TRS-80, the PET, because these were all built in my hometown. I took a school trip to go see how they were made.
The PET was in Fort Worth?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Tandy has always been
Pet's not Tandy. Pet's Commodore.
I'm not sorry. The TRS-80.
Okay.
Did I say PET?
Yes.
I'm a moron.
I'm with you now.
No, they were coming out of Pennsylvania, I think.
Maybe.
Yeah, and wherever the Commodore was based, because they had that we talked about it before. They had that full integration where they were manufacturing the chips, making the chassis, putting them together, and shipping them out, basically in a row of 10 buildings.
Right.
Which is no longer done in the United States, which is a shame. We had that big chip shortage a few years ago, and it's like, I know for a fact there are 2 or 3 chip manufacturing plants less than 50 miles from where I'm standing that have been mothballed for 10 to 20 years. And instead of building new ones, we could open those back up. They'd have to be retooled, but it would be cheaper than building a new one, I would think. Maybe not. I don't know. But yeah, these these TRS-80s, the TRS-80 CoCos, and even the Tandy 1000s, they were all decent computers, and you could get them at an inexpensive price and put it in your home and use it. Yeah, you may have had to buy more peripherals than you did with the Apple, because you bought a Macintosh, it came with a monitor and everything else, and you plugged it in and you just went. But it was also 3 times the price. And you could play around with what peripherals you got and really maximize what you could do with, again, the Commodore or the TRS-80 CoCo and whatnot. But yeah, that's about it for the CoCo. Thanks for letting me go down that geeky little line. Thanks for going down it with me.
You bet. We've done several of these, so do listen to any of the previous episodes where we've covered some of these earlier computers and gaming systems and whatnot. They're definitely stuff that we nerded out about when we were younger.
Oh my God.
On the various systems.
Everybody used that Zilog Z80 chip at one point or another. Your gaming consoles, your computers, it kind of revolutionized the world there for a few years.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for another path down another computing/gaming system. Appreciate that. With that, we'll step over to the murdery side of the house.
Murder.
For today, I got my information off Medium, Investigation Discovery, the Purcell Register, the Messenger, and Murder Database, and this is the story of the murder of Jamie Rose Bolin.
Jamie Rose Bolin.
This is not a pretty one.
Okay.
Just FYI. It's not long either. It's a little shorter than normal, but just be prepared. Born on August 7th, 1995 in Edmond, Oklahoma, Jamie Rose Bolin was a happy little girl who loved to sing, ride four-wheelers, sew, and watch movies. In 2006, 10-year-old Jamie was a 5th grade student at Purcell Intermediate School and lived with her father, Curtis Bolin, at the Purcell Park Apartments. On April 12, 2006, Jamie had returned home from school and decided to ride her bicycle around the neighborhood, but sadly on this day she would vanish. The 10-year-old hadn't been missing long before an Amber Alert was issued. Police immediately searched the premises of her apartment complex, going door to door to investigate her neighbors, conducting searches and trying to find persons of interest, including individuals that had no good alibi or stuck out to them. And it wasn't long before police stumbled upon one of her neighbors, a man who lived in the same building just across the breezeway. He was an eccentric man who pretty much kept to himself and had lived alone with his pet rat, and his name was Kevin Ray Underwood.
Kevin Ray Underwood.
So Kevin had been born on December 19th, 1979 in Purcell, Oklahoma. The shy 26-year-old worked as a grocery store clerk, and he often took to his computer where he played out a more confident, powerful character. He would post long, lengthy rants to his MySpace and Blogger account. One of his stranger posts read, quote, "If you were a cannibal, what would you wear to dinner?" Answering to himself, he wrote, quote, "The skin of last night's main course." Kevin openly described himself on his blog as a, quote, "single, bored, and lonely man with a, quote, dangerously weird fantasies." He recognized that he was depressed and socially incompetent, noting that his days off were spent in front of the computer, blogging or playing the computer role-playing game, Kingdom of Loathing. I'd never heard of that. Reports say that Kevin had no prior history of serious mental illness. On his blog, however, he discussed his social phobia, medication, and therapy at length. He also acknowledged crippling periods of depression when starting college and an unrequited crush who had died in a car accident. Off his medication, Kevin seems to have recognized that his thoughts were growing more bizarre. Along with posting links to odd news stories or the results of an online test on, quote, "How evil are you?" he considered seeking another prescription for Lexapro just before the killing, but did not. Kevin often made comments about killing people, something which was never taken seriously, and he also owned a Barbie doll with nails driven through its eyes.
Huh.
On April 17th, 2006, two neighbors of Kevin's told police that they had sighted Jamie in Kevin's presence shortly before her disappearance. Being one of the last people to see Jamie, Kevin immediately became a person of interest. After a 45-minute interview, this is where it kind of gets interesting. After a 45-minute interview, Kevin agreed to a search of his apartment. His apartment was filled with knives, swords, horror movies, and serial killer documentaries, and he worried about what law enforcement would think of him, but his demeanor was calm. During the search, however, investigators stumbled upon a plastic storage tub sealed with duct tape in his bedroom closet. Kevin explained that the tub was sealed to keep moisture from damaging the comic books inside. But when police opened a corner of the tub...
That's not how you do that.
No. But when police opened a corner of the tub, they saw a blue strapless shirt. Same shirt that the missing little girl was said to have been wearing shortly before her disappearance. The police officer then turned to Kevin, who was standing nearby, and then he commented, quote, "There's no comics in here, there's clothing." Kevin then wasted no time in admitting his guilt to the officer, stating, "Go ahead and arrest me. She's in there. I chopped her up." The police then located the remains of Jamie Rose Bolin inside the large plastic storage bin that was taped shut, and they also discovered her dismantled bicycle beneath his bed.
How long were they on this before they caught him?
It wasn't long. I think it was within the day.
Oh man. Good for the Purcell police.
Yes.
Way to go, guys.
Well, Purcell Police Chief David Tompkins said that investigators believe the fifth grader slaying was well planned out, and Underwood initially may have been targeting a woman and a 5-year-old boy, but selected the little girl when she happened to show up at his apartment. Underwood and Bolin were acquaintances and had interacted before, including the night prior to the child's murder when she used his phone to order pizza, according to the police. The night of Bolin's murder, the district attorney, Tim Kuykendall, later said Underwood struck the girl multiple times in the head with the cutting board and then suffocated her. The district attorney said, quote, "She pled for her life. The first thing out of her mouth when he hit her was, 'I'm sorry.'" That later came out in testimony.
Oh, wow.
Underwood later said, quote, "That's something that, haunted me forever since it happened. She started yelling, 'I'm sorry,' which, I'm like, what's she sorry for? She didn't do anything wrong. It's me. I'm the one that should be sorry." As questioning continued, Underwood said that his father was a butcher and that Underwood had fantasized about butchering a human. An autopsy on the deceased girl would later reveal the true horror of what Kevin Ray Underwood had done to her when he had carried out his twisted fantasies. Her throat had been cut from ear to ear in an apparent attempt to decapitate her, but otherwise her body was nude and intact. She'd been bludgeoned with a wooden cutting board before being strangled to death with duct tape in Kevin's bare hands. Police stated they found a meat tenderizer and barbecue skewers at the scene, which they presume were intended to use on the victim's corpse. Chief Tompkins stated that Bolin's murder was the culmination of Underwood's fantasy to, quote, "kidnap a person, rape them, torture them, kill them, cut off their head, drain the body of blood, rape the corpse, and then eat the corpse and dispose of the organs and bones." During his interview, Kevin Ray Underwood began to hyperventilate as he confided to an FBI agent, quote, "I'm going to burn in hell." Kevin was arrested for the murder of his 10-year-old neighbor, and his trial began on February 29, 2008. Prosecutors at the trial demonstrated how Kevin, who was a diehard fan of Silence of the Lambs, abducted the girl, bludgeoned and strangled her, and he had also sexually assaulted her after killing her. During his trial, prosecutors played a videotape confession in which Underwood told investigators he lured the girl into his apartment before carrying out her gruesome murder. Kevin told authorities he was fueled by sexual fantasies that involved torturing, raping, and killing and eating his victim, although no evidence was presented that he cannibalized the body. Underwood said that he masturbated frequently, and sometimes while he was watching children play outside of his apartment, he was thinking about kidnapping and raping one. He would become so sexually aroused that he couldn't go through with the plan. He said in the confession, quote, "I wanted to know what it tasted like, and just the thought of eating someone was appealing to me. But then it kept kind of evolving from there because I am, sexually frustrated. I haven't had sex in 4 years. Okay. You're warped. I'm sorry. I understand sexually frustrated, but damn, enough to kill and want to and
Want to eat somebody? Yeah,
rape them
that's
after
not
death.
no. No.
He did
No, no,
claim
no, 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 no.
no.
No. No, 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 no.
Yeah, they don't fit. It doesn't fit.
No. No, no. Hey, he's a grown adult in a, at least close to a major metropolitan area. If you can't meet someone, you can pay someone.
Okay,
I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying.
We don't advocate that.
No, we don't advocate
that. He did claim that he was unable to go through with his plan to eat her remains, though. Records show that he told FBI agents about wanting to stick skewers through her cheeks and needles in her eyes. He claimed to agents that Bolin became his victim by chance, and he appeared to downplay his involvement in luring her to her death. He said he'd been planning his crime seriously for about a month, but he didn't have anyone in mind originally. He said he stood outside his apartment door watching the children and trying to choose one. He said, quote, "She was a very trusting kid that if it hadn't been me, it could have ended up being someone else because like I said, she just kind of wandered into my apartment. I didn't, force her in there or even ask her in." Melissa,
go ahead.
Whoa. Yep,
His supposition is that it hadn't have been him, it would have been somebody else who would have murdered her. And
yes,
what a okay.
Yeah,
sorry. I'm trying not to be judgy.
No, I understand. Melissa Custer, the woman who had an almost decade-long online relationship with Underwood, testified that she chatted online with Underwood shortly after he allegedly killed Bolin. Custer said Underwood seemed, quote, unusually happier the day of Bolin's disappearance. The next day, she said he told her he had, quote, a quote, difficult 24 hours and said he didn't want the police to come and search his apartment. Red flag?
Uh-huh.
Okay, hang on. 2 months before the killing, Kevin Ray Underwood messaged a friend online that he said he wanted to write a children's book that included anal sex. What the actual fuck? I can't. Yeah.
Nobody said anything?
Exactly.
Our dear listeners, if you see something, say something, please.
Prevent stuff like this from happening.
Yes. Don't beat your kids. And if you see some weirdo or talk to some weirdo, say something to somebody.
The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation agents also found pictures of autopsies of women on his computer. Kevin's father, Larry Ray Underwood, testified to not being at his son's apartment in more than a year, and his mother, Connie Underwood, testified about her son's social anxiety history. Underwood's attorneys did not dispute that he killed the girl, and it took jurors less than an hour to find him guilty. His attorney argued, however, that Underwood's life should be spared because he suffered from mental illness and he could be helped with medication. I do agree he was mentally ill.
Yes.
Despite his parents' plea to spare their son's life, Kevin was sentenced to be put to death by lethal injection, and the jury needed just 20 minutes to convict him of first-degree murder. He didn't show any signs of emotion when the judge handed down the sentence. Over 8 years later, in July of 2016, a federal judge rejected Underwood's argument that he was ineligible for the death penalty because he had Asperger's syndrome and battled mental illness. His juries had told jurors in 2008 that Underwood was diagnosed with schizotypal personality disorder. His attorneys had argued that his life should be spared because he suffered from this mental illness. Defense attorneys also said Underwood was bullied as a child and was emotionally and verbally abused by his parents. I didn't find a whole lot of notes on that, though. The judge did note in his ruling that Bolin's murder was, quote, especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel. And on July 1st, 2022, Kevin was one of 25 death row inmates to be scheduled for execution in Oklahoma on December 7th, 2023. 25 on that date.
On one day.
Yep.
Wow.
His execution was later postponed due to a request by Attorney General Gettner Drummond, who was asked for 60 days between executions rather than 30. The order came after State Attorney General Gettner Drummond said that the rate should be slowed to one every 60 days or more because the quicker clip was unsustainable. So I'm not understanding that note, why they were all scheduled on that date, but they wanted time in between. I don't understand that one.
Well, I mean, presumably they only have one execution chamber.
Right, but one of the notes said that there were 25 scheduled for execution on December 2023, but they wanted 30 days or 60 days between executions. I don't know. The just realized those notes don't make sense. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Oklahoma has carried out more executions per capita than any other state since the Supreme Court reinstated capital punishment in 1976. Underwood is currently awaiting a new execution date on death row at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAllister. Jamie Rose Bolin's funeral service was held at the Purcell High School gymnasium. It's estimated that around 1,000 people turned up to pay their respects for the little girl. Members of her Girl Scout troop and police who searched for her were in tears as her favorite songs were played and a video about her was shown. And an emotional pastor, Dwayne Elmore, tried to confront the mourners, telling them the youngster was, quote, in a better place and heaven needed another rose. And that is the story, of Jamie Rose Bolin.
Thank you for that story. And kudos to the Purcell, Oklahoma Police Department for being snap on that.
Yeah.
Because that dude would have done that again.
Well, yeah, probably. And not as well, okay, yes, as much as the police department, but they were lucky and there was a witness that saw Jamie with Kevin Underwood. So, glad the police jumped on that very quickly. She was reported missing. They jumped on the investigation. They started searching. They found a witness. Then they got to him. So, good all the way around. So, yeah, he's someone who needs help. He's not going to get it. He's sitting on death row, and that's where he's going to stay until he dies.
Yep.
So, anyway, that takes us to the end of another recording week. Thank each and every one of you for staying in and listening. As always, you can find more information on our website, nerderyandmurdery.com. That's our hub with everything we talk about. You can find our episodes there, as well as links to what we talk about, pictures of the topics that we discuss. And you can also find the link to our YouTube page, which Zig so often updates.
Yes, there is a playlist there where you can peruse things about the episodes every time. In fact, there's several videos on the CoCo itself, and you can kind of see the history and some other things.
Cool. Thank you for all your work on that.
Thank you, sir.
On our website, you can also find the link to our merchandise page, where if you wish to show off your Nerdery and Murdery fandom, please do consider purchasing something from there. That, along with our Patreon, our patrons help with the costs with this show. We do appreciate our patrons. They help keep us on the air, help us keep going, because there are costs that are associated with this and putting this on the air for your enjoyment.
Please and thank you.
Please and thank you. And last but not least, please don't forget to leave a 5-star review wherever you can. It helps us and helps others find our topics that we are discussing. So with that,
I have been Zig with your Nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your Murdery.
Cue the music.